They say that silence isn't really silent. That if you listen carefully enough, in a room with no sound at all, you'll eventually hear things that shouldn't be there. Your heartbeat, the rush of blood through your veins, the electrical hum of your own nervous system. But what they don't tell you is what happens when you hear something else. My name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what I found in apartment 4B of the Rothmore Building, and what it cost me to leave. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of stories that will make you question whether you're truly alone right now. You're listening to Silent Scream Chronicles. Do well to subscribe, share, and hit the like button for more tales to come. And also let me know where you're listening from in the comments. I moved into the Rothmore in late September 3 years ago. It was one of those old buildings you find in the forgotten parts of the city, the kind that somehow survived urban renewal, squatting between modern glass towers like a rotten tooth. The rent was suspiciously cheap, but I was broke, fresh out of a bad relationship, and desperate for a new start. The landlord, Mr. Vesic, was a thin man with watery eyes who never quite looked at you directly. When he showed me the apartment, he moved through it quickly, almost mechanically, pointing out features without enthusiasm. Hardwood floors, he muttered. Original fixtures. Quiet building. That last part should have been my first warning. The apartment was a studio, barely 400 square feet, with a kitchenette along one wall and a bathroom so small you could touch both walls while sitting on the toilet. But it had high ceilings and large windows that let in pale afternoon light. And most importantly, it was mine. I moved in on a Wednesday. For the first 3 days, everything was fine. Normal. I unpacked my boxes, arranged my furniture, tried to make the space feel like home. The building was indeed quiet, almost eerily so. I never heard my neighbors. No footsteps above me, no voices through the walls, no doors slamming in the hallway. Just silence. It was on the 4th night that I first noticed the room. I'd been lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, when I noticed something odd about the wall opposite me. The dimensions seemed wrong somehow. I got up and measured the apartment. From the entrance to the far wall was about 25 feet. But when I went outside into the hallway and paced off the distance, the building extended at least another 10 feet beyond where my wall should have been. There was space missing. A gap in reality that shouldn't exist. I knocked on the wall. Solid. No hollow sound that would indicate a space behind it. But the math didn't lie. There was a room back there. A room that didn't appear on the floor plan Mr. Vesic had shown me. I should have left it alone. The next morning, I went down to the superintendent's office in the basement. The door was open, and I found Mr. Vesic sitting at a desk covered in yellowed papers and ancient rent receipts. "The wall in my apartment," I said. "There's a space behind it. A room." His watery eyes finally met mine, and for just a moment I saw something in them. Fear. Sadness. Warning. "No room," he said quietly. "Just wall." "But I measured." "Just wall," he repeated, his voice firmer now. "Old building. Thick walls. Insulation. That's all." He turned back to his papers, and I knew the conversation was over. But I couldn't let it go. I spent the next week becoming obsessed with that wall. I studied the building's architecture from the outside, took measurements, drew diagrams. The space was definitely there. Approximately 10 feet deep and the width of my apartment. A room sealed off from the world. I researched the building's history. The Rothmore was built in 1928, during the final gasp of the city's pre-Depression boom. It had been a luxury building once, with ornate details and expensive materials. Over the decades, it had deteriorated, been subdivided, renovated again, until it was barely recognizable from its original design. But I couldn't find any mention of sealed rooms or architectural mysteries. I did, however, find something else. In an archived newspaper from 1952, I found a brief article about the Rothmore. It mentioned that apartment 4B had been vacant for over a year, and that the building management was struggling to find tenants willing to rent it. The reason? The previous tenant had died there. A woman named Eleanor Marsh. The article didn't provide many details, only that she had been found after neighbors complained about a smell. She'd been dead for several weeks. The article mentioned something strange. When they found her body, she was sitting in a chair, facing the eastern wall of the apartment, headphones on her head. The old article said the record player she'd been listening to had long since stopped, the needle scratching at the end of its rotation, but she'd been sitting there, listening to silence. The eastern wall. The wall where the hidden room should be. I became convinced that Eleanor Marsh had known about the room. That maybe she'd even found a way inside. My obsession deepened. I stopped going out except for work and groceries. Every evening I'd come home and examine that wall, looking for seams, hidden doors, any indication of an entrance. I knocked on every square inch of it, listening for a change in tone that might indicate a hollow space or a doorway. And then, on a Friday night exactly 2 weeks after I'd first noticed the discrepancy, I heard something. It was faint. 3 soft knocks, coming from inside the wall. I froze, my fist still raised from my own knocking. Had I imagined it? I held my breath and listened. Nothing. I knocked again. 3 times. 3 knocks answered me. From inside the wall. My rational mind tried to explain it away. The building settling. A neighbor doing work on the other side. But I knew the truth in my bones. Something was in that room. Something was responding. Hello! I called out to the wall. Silence. I knocked again. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 came the response. But this time there was something else. A sound so quiet I almost missed it. A voice. No, not quite a voice. More like a whisper of air forming words. Listen, it seemed to say. I pressed my ear against the wall. At first, I heard nothing but the usual sounds of an old building. Distant traffic, the hum of electrical wiring, the whisper of wind through gaps in the window frames. But then, underneath all of that, I heard something else. Breathing. Slow, steady breathing coming from inside the wall. I jerked back, my heart pounding. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just the building's ventilation system or my own breathing echoing back at me. But I knew better. Something was in that room. Something was alive in there. Or something had been alive in there once. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed, staring at the wall, listening. The breathing continued, so faint I could only hear it when I held my own breath. A rhythm that never varied, never stopped. As dawn broke and pale light filtered through my windows, the breathing finally ceased. But by then I'd made a decision. I was going to get into that room. I spent the next day at the hardware store buying tools. A hammer, a pry bar, a small sledgehammer. The clerk gave me a concerned look, but I didn't care. I needed to know what was behind that wall. That evening I started at the corner where the wall met the ceiling. The plaster was old and crumbled easily under the hammer. Dust filled the air as I worked, making me cough, but I didn't stop. It took me 3 hours to make a hole big enough to peer through. I shone my flashlight through the gap, my hands shaking. The beam illuminated a small room, maybe 10 feet by 12 feet. Me. Completely empty except for a single wooden chair in the center, facing away from me. And sitting in that chair was a figure. I couldn't see details. Just a silhouette, motionless, sitting perfectly still in that chair. For several seconds I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My mind struggled to process what I was seeing. Then the figure's head began to turn. Slowly. So slowly. Toward me. I stumbled backward, dropping my flashlight. It rolled across the floor, beam spinning wildly. When I finally gathered the courage to look through the hole again, the chair was empty. But I could hear breathing. Closer now. Right on the other side of the wall. Please, a voice whispered. A woman's voice, dry and ancient. Let me out. I should have run. Should have grabbed my things and left that apartment forever. But something held me there. Curiosity. Compulsion. Or had something in that room already gotten its hooks into me? Who are you? Asked. Eleanor, the voice replied. I've been listening for so long. So very long. Please, let me out. Eleanor Marsh. The woman who died in 1952. The woman who'd been found sitting, listening to silence. You're dead, I said, my voice shaking. I read about you. You died. A sound came from the wall. Might have been a laugh. Or a sob. Or something else entirely. Dead. The voice whispered. Is that what you think? I'm not dead. I'm listening. I've always been listening. And now? Now you're listening too. I sealed the hole that night. Mixed quick-dry cement and filled it in. Covered it with plaster, painted over it. Tried to erase what I'd found. But it was too late. Because that night, lying in bed, I could still hear her. Not through the wall anymore. No, she was closer than that. I could hear her breathing in the darkness of my room. Feel her presence hovering just beyond my vision. And underneath it all, I could hear something else. Whispers. Hundreds of whispers, thousands maybe, all overlapping, all saying different things. They came from everywhere and nowhere, filling my head until I wanted to scream. But I didn't scream. I listened. That's what Eleanor wanted. What she'd always wanted. Someone to listen. I learned her story over the following nights, pieced together from whispers in the dark. She'd been a sound engineer in the 1940s, one of the few women in the field. She'd become obsessed with silence, with the idea of creating a perfectly soundless room where she could hear the universe itself. She'd built that room behind the wall, sealed it off, insulated it, made it as close to silent as possible. And then she'd gone in there to listen. But she'd heard something. Something that lived in the silence. Something that spoke in the spaces between sounds. It had taught her how to listen. Really listen. To hear the sounds that humans weren't meant to hear. The frequency of thoughts. The vibration of emotions. The resonance of souls passing from one state to another. She'd listened until she couldn't stop. Until listening became all she was. And now she wanted to share it with me. I tried to leave the apartment. Packed my things, called friends, made plans. But every time I reached the door, I found myself turning back. The whispers would get louder, more insistent, until I couldn't think about anything else except listening. The breathing never stopped now. Followed me everywhere. To work, to the store, even outside in the noise and chaos of the city. Under everything I could hear Eleanor breathing, waiting, listening. And slowly, I began to hear the other things she heard. The sound of the earth rotating. The hum of gravity. The ultrasonic screams of molecules as they vibrated in empty space. The breathing of dead things in dark places. The whispers of thoughts from minds I'd never meet. It was beautiful and terrible and maddening. I'm in the apartment now. I don't leave anymore. Don't need to. Everything I need to know comes through the listening. The hole I made in the wall is open again. I can't remember opening it, but it's there, a dark gap into that silent room. Sometimes I see Eleanor sitting in her chair. Sometimes the chair is empty. Sometimes I can't tell if I'm looking at her or at my own reflection somehow cast backward through time. Mr. Vesic came by last week. Or maybe it was last month. Time sounds different when you're listening properly. He stood in my doorway, those watery eyes full of resignation. You should go, he said quietly. Before it's too late. But we both knew it was already too late. I could hear it in the way he breathed. The way his voice carried echoes of the dozens of other tenants who'd lived in 4B over the years. All of them had heard the breathing. All of them had listened. Most of them had escaped. But some of us learned to hear. If you're listening to this, if my words have somehow made it out of this apartment and into the world, I want you to understand something. Silence isn't empty. It's full. So full it drowns out everything else once you learn how to hear it properly. And once you start listening, really listening, you'll never stop. I can hear you now, wherever you are. The frequency of your attention, the resonance of your thoughts as you process my words. You're listening to me. Which means I'm listening to you. Eleanor's teaching me. Soon I'll be able to hear everything, everyone, all at once. And after that I'll teach others. The breathing is so loud now. It fills the apartment, fills my head, fills every empty space in the world. And underneath it I can hear new sounds. The sound of you leaning closer. The sound of your heart beating faster. The sound of you beginning to listen. Really listen. 3 knocks. Do you hear them? 1, 2, 3. They're not coming from the wall anymore. They're coming from inside your head. Because now you're in the listening room with us. And you'll never leave. Close your eyes. Hold your breath. And listen to what's underneath the silence. We're all here. Waiting. Listening. If you made it this far, congratulations. You're still here. Still listening. If this story left you unsettled, craving more dark tales from the spaces between silence and sound, then you found your home here at Silent Scream Chronicles. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss when the next nightmare drops. We release new horror stories every day, and trust me, each one goes deeper into the dark than the last. Drop a comment below and tell me. Have you ever heard something you couldn't explain? Something in the silence that shouldn't have been there? I read every comment, and who knows? Your story might inspire the next episode. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button. It helps other horror fans find us in the algorithm's endless void. Until next time, keep your ears open and your lights on. This is Silent Scream Chronicles. And remember, we're always listening.